All right. Matt, the Mortgage Guy here. Monday, live Q&A tonight. I have the pleasure of Ryan Lundquist, Sacramento Appraisal Blog. Thanks for joining us, Ryan. I know that you were somebody that continued to get requested. People kept saying, "Bring that appraiser guy back." And so thanks for agreeing to be on with us tonight. And happy to chat with you about anything you'd like to chat about. I know I jotted down a few questions. I got some things that people have been asking me to ask you specifically. They want your advice. So how you doing, man?
Doing good. And hey, Matt, and hi, everyone. And I'm really glad to be here tonight. And I'm hopeful that people ask questions. We're only as good as our conversation. And so hoping that we can talk some shop and solve some of the big problems in the world tonight.
Yeah, for sure. That's the thing too, is people are always like thanking me. They're like, "Thank you so much for that. That was great." And every Monday, literally, I get off after 90 minutes or so, and I'm like thankful for all the great questions that were answered, because I have like these ahas every single time. I'm like, man, I haven't thought about that. That's a good question. And then it gets me to think. It keeps me sharp as a mortgage broker. So I get a kick out of these things. I really enjoy them, and so I put in the comments, I don't know if you can necessarily see it on your side, but I didn't want to forget the question. So I posted it up there, and would love to get your take on this, because it's specifically about appraisals. And most people that know you, and if you haven't checked out sacramentoappraisalblog.com, I encourage you to do it, know that not only are you a local appraiser who's good at the appraisal game, but for Sacramento real estate agents, for anybody following real estate, people look to you for stats, and they love your take on stats, not just the raw statistics you're able to pull up and the fancy graphs you can make, but your unbiased opinions on, hey, here's what's going on in real estate, and here's what the stats are saying, and here's how I interpret it. So anyhow, with all that being said, I'd love to get your comments, your feedback on this question, which I think was a YouTube comment that said, "Can you please make a video on the home appraisal report?" And first, when I saw that, I'm like, great, I don't have to answer this. I'll let the pro answer this. And Lucerne, who asked this question, wants to know, explain the two types of methods used and how it's different for existing home sales versus new construction home sales.
Okay, absolutely. Well, I'll try to get to some of that. And first, I know some people right now are watching the Giants. I love the Giants. There's a playoff game going on right now, but we welcome Giants and Dodgers fans, multitask here. What's more exciting than talking about appraisals, right? There's different methods to value. And so most of the time, appraisers are using what's called the sales comparison approach, where they're choosing comps, sales and listings and pendings that are, presumably similar, and then using that to help establish value. There's something called the income approach, which considers the income that a property can have. And usually that's really done in multi-unit situations, 2 to 4 units, and not usually for a single family home. And then there's the cost approach, considering the value of the land and, cost of the land and cost of construction, that sort of thing. But when it comes to new properties versus older properties, the methodology is actually similar. The goal of an appraiser is to use an apples to apples approach, and to where, this brand new home, I'm probably going to be using other brand new properties for comparison. All right. Because it's sort of like going to the Toyota dealership and, buying the best car on their lot. And, the model that's 2 years old is somewhat new, but it's driven off a lot. It is not the same thing. Same thing in real estate. But honestly, the methodology is just the same for an older home, built in the 50s, where we're asking ourselves, what's a reasonable substitute? If the subject wasn't available, what else would a buyer buy? Okay. And so if that home is brand new, a buyer is going to be looking for brand new homes. And if that home was built in the 50s, probably something in the 50s in the neighborhood that's somewhat similar. And, so there's not really a different methodology per se. I don't know if that answers your question, but you can absolutely jump in if needed later. That's no problem. So.
Yeah, for sure. And that was my advice, is please join us on the live, follow up on your question. I know that, folks, and the end of Lucerne's question was, she's concerned, she's in contract, and she talked about an attorney. So I know this isn't California. We don't use attorneys. We use escrow. It appraised low, and she's worried about losing her 10% retainer on a jumbo loan. So best of luck to you, Lucerne. Follow up with me if you'd like, and I can get in touch with Ryan if you have further questions. And hopefully that was somewhat helpful. And before we get people joining on and asking questions, I'd love to get a few pieces of opinion from you on just different stuff that's happening in housing. Right? We've got the TikTok videos that are going viral talking about Zillow buying up all the inventory. And I think that's interesting. I haven't talked to you or heard your take on it, but I made a video kind of reacting to that. So as an appraiser who does appraisals, is it possible for, I'm sure you saw that TikTok video, right? You buy 30 houses at 300,000, then you buy number 31 for 340. Then all of a sudden you created 1.2 million in extra equity. How likely is that a scenario to happen from an appraiser standpoint?
Gosh, I know there's lots of accusations that Zillow or other iBuyers are trying to manipulate the market. And I mean, honestly, I think we just need stats to really see that. That's a very serious accusation. It's sort of like when appraisers are trying to keep some neighborhoods down. They're employing systemic racism, and they're trying to suppress values. And I'm like, that would be really, really difficult to do. Not to minimize the issue. It's just, I think on paper it sounds really plausible, but in actuality, that's very difficult. And so the thing is with Zillow, they're purchasing homes, and buyers are savvy. If someone overpays for a property, one sale doesn't make or break a market. And so, if there's one property that, all of a sudden closed $30,000 higher than everything, it doesn't automatically mean the market's there. And so appraisers have to essentially appraise the comps, okay? And so it doesn't just mean that we're going to go there. Or if there's a sale that's really low, $50,000 below everything else, that doesn't all of a sudden mean that the market is there. And so I think we have to weigh each comp. One of the struggles this year, all year long, especially during the first 2 quarters, the market was really aggressive. And at times I would look and go, why in the world did this one property close 60,000 more than everything? Usually then I call the agent, oh yeah, there was an appraisal waiver, or the buyer just needed the property and they paid above everything else. And so I'm looking at that sale going, that doesn't establish the new market. And so, as much as I would like to, see Zillow, maybe accused of something like that, I'm just kidding. I think that we have to be careful about accusations, and so I'm going to be looking for stats. If there's any evidence of market manipulation, I mean, that's such a serious thing. But backing up, I think this is a concern as we're watching the market. And in the Sacramento region, Zillow, Open Door, and Redfin own just over 700 properties right now. And that's mind-blowing. A few months ago, they owned about 230. And so they've been on a buying rampage. And I think that there should be some critique here for sort of tech companies wanting to sort of, create a new system for real estate that gives them advantage. And so the narrative is all about like, man, consumers, we're going to make it so easy on you guys. This is going to be great for you. But let's just not forget the big picture, that it's sort of like the commoditization of real estate, the Amazonization, so to speak, of, trying to get one company to own more. And I guess the public just gets to decide, is this a good thing or bad or not? And so that's kind of my take. There's a lot to this conversation. I'm watching it very, very closely. It's been unreal to see in the market right now. iBuyers have about a 6.4% share of all listings and pendings. Okay. And so that's definitely gone up. Earlier in the year, it was more like 1%. And so they've really gained market share. But I just remind everyone too that about 93 to 94% of the market is not this model. And so it's not like, anywhere close to even 50% of the market is this. And so we have to keep that in context.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting stuff too, because as a mortgage broker, real estate agents are, my partners, and I work alongside real estate agents. I understand the value of real estate agents, but, maybe there is a place for this iBuyer for a certain segment. But like you said, if it becomes 3, 4, 5% of the market. 95% is still going to be traditional real estate sales and whatnot. And so, I see it. And as much as I'm a champion for the real estate agent and all the value they provide, there's going to be certain scenarios where, hey, if you've got, an out of town move, or you've got something where, you understand you're selling at a discount, or you need to sell it on a certain timeline, and, this iBuyer model fits, then maybe that works, for 2 out of 100, 3 out of 100 sellers. But, for most people, they're still going to go the traditional route. So yeah, like you, I'm following it. It'll be interesting to watch how it unfolds, what they do, because, that's kind of wild to think, a 600% increase, from 1% to 6%, in this same calendar year. Everybody wants to know what they're up to. What are they doing? Because I've seen it. Anybody else I think who's paying attention to real estate has seen it, where it's like, wow, they paid $590 for that. All these other comps are $550. Like, what's the plan, right? And then we see it sit on the market and it doesn't sell. What are your thoughts? I'm just curious on what might be the game plan for the big iBuyers.
Well, I think the game plan is for them to own the real estate process. And, I think all along, you had some companies like Zillow say, hey, we're not going to be buying and selling homes. And, I think clearly that was proven to be false. But the goal is, if these companies can do loans, if they can do title and escrow, if they could, work directly with, buyers and maybe cut out some of the middle people, then the idea is for them they can maybe make a little bit less money when they buy a property, and they don't have to flip it for, like a traditional investor would really have to think, what's the return on investment here? And so they can maybe pay a little bit more, theoretically, make money in other parts of the transaction and still be profitable. I think my concern is that these companies have such a war chest. They have this arsenal of millions upon millions and millions of dollars, and it almost feels unnatural then for them to compete in the open market, because if they don't have to sort of follow the traditional rules like a mom and pop investor would, where they're like, no way could we pay that amount, then that naturally gives them advantage. And, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know if there's anything legal that should be, paid attention. I'm just saying that from a market perspective, it's very unnatural to be able to compete at that level. And, I think, like you said, there's a place for different models. Technology is going to change real estate. It's certainly changing the appraisal space. And, I think there's a place in this world for appraisal waivers. There's a place in this world for desktop appraisals and AVMs. And, I think that the whole real estate community has to concede that there is a place for different models, but it's just sort of that question of, okay, is this going to be a good thing for real estate, no matter how big or small it ends up being? I think that's a viable question that the public at least should be asking or can be asking.
Yeah, I actually had a great conversation with a real estate agent this week about, these huge companies. And like you said, unlimited resources, unlimited money, not unlimited, but you get the picture, right? It doesn't feel natural from my standpoint either that these folks have all the data. Imagine owning a company with all this money and all this resources and all the data to say, you know what, we've started to see a trend, and more people are searching Irvine, California, or more people are searching Boise, Idaho, whatever it is, right? Where you can maybe use the data to predict trends on where people might be moving. And then you spend millions of dollars buying homes in that market ahead of what might be a trend. Like, that seems a little bit, I don't know, unfair is probably the simplest way to put it. But I don't want to belabor the point too much. It'll be interesting to see what comes of it.
Data is power,
Yeah.
If you control the data, you control the narrative and the stats. Like, it's meaningful. There's opportunities for everyone out there for that. And so, whether it's NAR, realtor.com, I mean, man, people have opportunities all over the place. I will say that. So I'm a little more bearish on that particular point.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you want good data, just pop on over to sacramentoappraisalblog.com. You'll find some great data. And since you do a lot of that research, and admittedly way more than I do, a lot of the information I have just comes from conversations and work with mortgage clients and with real estate agents, and what I kind of instinctively can feel in the market. You're more, digging into the data. Something I looked at today, and I made a video on it that's coming out tomorrow on my channel, was I'm trying to figure out, this is honest truth coming out of my mouth. I can't figure out what's going on with the market. 4 to 6 weeks ago, I felt like we were, someone call it softening. I felt like it was getting easier for the 97, 104 clients that I have that are fully pre-approved and ready to roll. And then I don't know exactly when it happened, but in the last few weeks, I've felt this 50,000 above ask, waive all contingencies on a $440,000 purchase price not get accepted. I'm like, I thought it was getting easier. Why is it super hard again? And then I looked at some Redfin stats, because Redfin's another company that's got a ton of data about like in contract within 2 weeks. And I saw, like, you'll probably speak to this better than I could because you watch it really close. I know you do with seasonality, but what have you seen that maybe just follows seasonality, and maybe I'm, incorrectly reading it, or it might be something that's a little bit out of the norm with, the amount of competition in a normal market, September, October?
Yeah, so I would think that there's a few things. I mean, first, the market is slowing, but that doesn't mean it's slow. And I think anytime I use the word slowing, sometimes it's like I spend, a few comments at least on each thread explaining that slowing does not mean slow. So I just try to say that from the get-go,
Yeah.
But I think we are definitely experiencing slowing. All the metrics show it. Whether it's prices or smaller houses selling, it's taking a little bit longer to sell. But the truth is that the market is still more aggressive than a normal fall season. And so, say for instance, almost 30% of properties in Sacramento County have price reductions. Okay, the last normal market we had in 2019, which honestly was a pretty aggressive fall still, in that market, it was closer to 40% of price reductions. And so it just shows that we have this market that it's not as aggressive as it was last year, thankfully, during the fall, but it's still more aggressive than a really sort of a normal, very competitive market in 2019. And so I'd say, say in 2019 also, at this time in September, properties sold 3% below their asking price. Okay, but then this last month, we have this market where properties still sold 1% above on average. So it's still out of sync. It's still sort of driving 95 when it should be driving 65 at this time. And so I think that's the dynamic we're experiencing. But the market's kind of weird where, sometimes just because things are slowing, it doesn't mean that, everything is, going to be selling below the list price. That's not the market we have right now. Like, so for instance, last month, properties on average went about $6,000 above the list price. Okay. And I know that's crazy. You think, okay, but then you have these examples of 50,000, but on average, you line up all 2,400 sales. That's like really aggressive for a September. Okay. But there's properties that sold below the list price, and then there's properties that went way above. Okay. Last month, 38% of all sales sold either at or below the list price. Okay, so 3.8 out of 10. And so, but that number should be higher. Okay, but we clearly have this market that's softening, but at the same time, it's still not normal. And so it's a market that's sort of flirting with normalcy, trying to get back to normal. And all the stats to me, in my mind, I mean, they're definitely sloughing off like they would in a normal season, but it's still sort of that car dynamic where it's just driving faster than it really normally does at this time. So that's kind of how I would explain it, maybe with some stats, but sort of a car analogy too.
Right. Yeah. It's good to hear. It's good to hear that, like, you only hear the most dramatic stories, and that's probably what like changes people's perspective on it. Then you hear the stats, you're like, oh, okay. If essentially 4 out of 10 are selling at or below, it's not as crazy as we think it is. Cause I know I looked back at some of the April, May, where it was, quote unquote frenzy buying, right? And people were paying any price for any house in any neighborhood. And we're thankfully out of that. Part of the video I made today was, for buyers, at least, I think the worst is behind us. So that's good news. I want to pop into some some comments and see if we can answer some questions. Thanks to some folks for joining. Kevin Hawthorne is here every week, so thanks for joining, Kevin. Appreciate your support. Appreciate everybody who's taking their time. Like Ryan said, there might be a baseball game on, but you can always catch the most exciting half is the second half anyway. So hang out with us for the beginning part of it. Johnny Stash is in contract selling his home for $750 and wants to know if one comp is at $750 and the rest are about $720 or lower. Is it likely my home will get appraised for $750? I know this is limited information, but what would you say?
I'd say yes, no, maybe. Okay, yeah, I wish I knew Johnny for sure. I don't know the situation, but I mean, kind of like I alluded to before, that one sale doesn't make or break the market. But I just look and go, how well does your property compete or really compare with that property that sold for $750? And because I think that's the issue. Sometimes we see a range in a market where things are maybe going $720 to $750, and if your property is very, very average, like those other homes at $720, and then we look at that one for $750, and it had a built-in pool, well, and yours doesn't, then it's kind of like, I think the market's telling us that you're at a lower place. But if you compete really well with that $750, and most notably, if there's other properties that are getting into contract around that level, $750 or so, they're very similar, wonderful. Because sales, remember, they tell us what the market used to be like in the past when the property might close today, but it got into contract in, say, late August. It tells me about the market in late August, not today. If I want to know the market today, I'm looking at pendings and listings and what's going on with those. And so I'd say just in your neighborhood, maybe look at both, and hopefully you'll get a sense of sort of where you're at. But I mean, honestly, it's sort of pins and needles when before the appraiser comes out. The whole appraisal process, it's stressful. I've been there personally as a buyer. I completely get it, and it's just one of those things where you just kind of hope and pray that it works out right.
Yeah, that's great insight. And one thing I wanted to ask, follow-up question on what you said, Ryan, was, like you said, the stuff that has sold and is a sold comp might be 45 or 60 days old, whereas the stuff that's pending might be pending and it just went into contract 10 days ago. How much weight can you give those pendings versus the sold comps? Because I think that a lot of people, lenders included, that are looking at this stuff, and we're not appraisal experts, might say, well, you got to look at sold comps. And if there's not sold comps that justify this price, then, if, for instance, right, in Johnny's scenario, if there's some 720 solds, there's one 750 sold, and then, area he's in is heated up, and you've got 750 to 770 pendings, are you going to be able to use that to justify, like, hey, this one, Johnny's, might even be a 760?
So obviously I don't know Johnny's, full situation here, but but in theory, like, we have to remember that I think it's a fallacy in real estate that we only get to look at sales. Like, right. I think sometimes I even hear appraisers echo that stuff. I'm going, if we're only looking at sales, and then we're essentially valuing properties from the past, because the task at hand is to say, how has the market changed since those properties got into contract in July and August, even though they closed today? And so what I can do is I can adjust my sales up. Okay, if it looks like there's upward movement based on the pendings, based on the listings, maybe there were 7 offers on the subject property at 750. Like, this is all data I'm collecting. I can adjust all the sales up, okay, to say 750, 760, whatever sort of I'm seeing out there in the market, okay. And so what makes or breaks an appraisal, I think, in a market that's moving fast, going up, is whether the appraiser adequately recognizes the market or accounts for how the market has changed since properties closed. And so, but yeah, I mean, I think it's a total fallacy to be like, I have to have a property that closed at 750 in order for this property to be worth 750. That really helps. Underwriters love to see that, but Let's imagine if a property, there was never a sale ever in this market, okay? And then the property is not worth nothing because there's not a comp. Somehow we're going to have to help establish value, even though maybe it's a tricky assignment, okay? Or if I'm appraising something on the river and there hasn't been a sale since last year, I'm not bound by whatever this property sold for last year. I'm going to use that really old comp and probably some that are 2 and 3 years old. But then my task is to say, how has the market changed? Let me adjust those suckers up, because that's where we recognize value. If we're really reflecting the market, like appraisers say all the time, our job is to reflect, then those adjustments need to be given. And same in a declining market. If the market's screaming down, I'm like, man, properties are not worth what they used to be worth 3 months ago. I got to adjust these suckers down because this is where the pendings are at. This is where the listings are at. Or the listings are trying to sell at 750. Nothing is moving there. And then I'm starting to look and go 720, 730, like maybe that's where the market's at. So yeah, Matt and Johnny, I mean, tremendous weight, I think, at least in my practice, is put on pendings. It's not just about everything that's closed, but let's remember one last thing, that you can have a pending that gets in the contract way above anything that's reasonable, and one pending doesn't make or break the market. I can't pin my whole understanding of the market on this one property that's probably never going to close because, man, there's no way it's worth 1.3 million, and somehow it got in a contract that level.
Right. Yeah. Great insight. That was awesome, man. Thank you. Question from Alex. Thanks for joining us, Mr. Alex Rodini. 1 month into my cash out refinance in SAC. First payment is 11-1. This is on my current home, soon to be our first rental. Can we start pre-approval process for a new home now or too soon after refi? The answer is no. And too soon after refi, yes. I mean, this is like mortgage fraud. And so I'm just going to tell you, don't do that. Be very careful. I'm not sure what your intentions were when you did a refinance on your primary, but if you were looking forward to like, hey, this is a cash out refinance, but I'm going to go buy a new primary and this is going to be a rental, you signed with the intention of occupying for a year. If plans changed, your kid's school moved, your job moved, something changed, sure, that happens. And I see people do that 7, 8, 9 months out, and it's not a full year. You write a letter of explanation and that's fine. But definitely you wouldn't do it now. The lender would, throw up some serious red flags, and people might not know this. So it's good to kind of say it. Like, you'll get put in a database. I've had folks try to do some sideways things. I've turned them away. They've gone to other brokers and try to get a loan done for what is, same type of thing where it's like, I'm calling something a primary where it's really going to be an investment property. You will just be put on a list where Fannie and Freddie won't lend to you. You will be put in a database where there's a red flag attached to you, and you won't ever be able to get a conventional loan ever again. So I won't belabor it anymore, but just don't do that. Okay.
The cool. Naughty list. Yeah, that's
bad.
Yeah.
You're going to get Kohl's in your stocking this year. Zeta is another regular of Matt the Mortgage Guy live Q&A. So appreciate you, Zeta, for joining us. She heard that the governor of California is letting the state buy foreclosures first. Is that true? If so, is that fair? Have you heard this, Ryan?
I haven't, and I don't know what business the state would have in managing foreclosures. Unless it was some sort of state-owned property or some state loan or something. But yeah, I mean, I haven't heard anything like that. All I know regarding foreclosures is they are so uncommon right now. Theoretically, maybe we would see some increase since there's been a moratorium. Moratorium gets lifted, and I mean, maybe we would see some more. But there's not sort of this tsunami that I think so many YouTube prophets have been predicting for well over a year. It's not materializing. And so, we'll see what happens. One interesting note, I'm kind of curious to see if there are distressed sales and sort of what big tech companies and investment funds, if they sort of, rub shoulders with bank, try to get close to them and try to get some distressed inventory that way. I'm kind of curious to see what happens there, but yeah, I don't see anything right now.
Right. Yeah. I haven't heard of that either. And I'll just echo Ryan's comments around, not a lot of foreclosures, not a lot of foreclosures coming. I've followed the forbearance stuff just because I get so many questions from clients about it. And, the CFPB made it really clear they're going to do everything in their power to provide assistance, modifications. They don't want to see a repeat of a big foreclosure crisis. So if you're a homeowner that's in forbearance, you're exiting forbearance and you're not, at risk of losing your home. One, folks have a ton of equity, and two, they're being offered, modifications, put the balance on the back, all kinds of stuff where, foreclosure is just not something that's happening. Exiting forbearances, which, those YouTube gurus that are predicting the crash of everything were saying that was going to be the catalyst, right? Is these millions of foreclosures, but just not happening. Michelle Buckhoff, thanks for joining us. Another appraisal question, and it's crystal ball time for Ryan, because some of these are just like, with limited information, you gotta make some guesses or some assumptions. But what would be the difference in appraised value for a brand new home with a view versus a 2-year-old home with no view, but the backyard landscaped and furniture included?
Okay, so I'm guessing, Michelle, that maybe you bought a house 2 years ago and you're comparing it to properties that are selling directly from the builder right now. So just a guess, gut instinct. Usually when I answer this question, that's how it goes. Forgive me if that's not the case. But I mean, here's the thing. There's not just one list of adjustments. I can't just say the difference is 20.3%. First of all, furniture is personal property. That's not going to count in the appraisal at all. All right. And so it doesn't matter how much you spent on that. Sometimes, here's the thing, with new construction, buyers are so enamored with new that they might even pay more for a property that is brand new compared to one 2 years ago that already has landscaping. Now, I know the owner says, hey, man, I spent $30,000 on rear landscaping. Like, this is worth so much. But I'm just saying from experience, it's often like a tractor beam for the buyer to purchase new construction, even though, like, logically, like, as an owner, as a guy right now, I would be like, I would take all day long the property that has, the backyard, so I don't have to do it. I don't want to do that. However, the only thing that matters is the market. And so what we have to do is let's look to other new sales, and let's look at stuff that's 2 years old and compare it to other resale properties. Okay, there are two different markets. It's sort of like, the 2-year-old Camaro. Well, what have other 2-year-old Camaros sold for? I know what the brand new ones are selling for, but show me, if I start lining up some examples of other ones, that's what matters most. And so we've got to look to the market to try to extract this. There's not a list out there. I wish there was. And in terms of the view, let's find other properties with views, because the best comps don't need any adjustments. If I can find something with a view that tells the story of the market, perfectly. And so there's all these different factors, and an appraiser is going to have to sort of, grid these out and sort of, maybe adjust up and down depending on all these factors, and, to be able to find value.
Is that one of those things, and maybe it's like under location on the appraisal? Because I know I've owned houses that are near freeway, and so like that's a downgrade on an appraisal because of location, right? It's like near traffic noise. But is view specifically something that you could provide a $10,000 or $15,000 adjustment up for?
So yeah, there's two fields. There's view and location. And so, I mean, technically every house has a view, right? And so I typically like to make my adjustments based on location, because I would say greenbelt location, because a view is so subjective. It's like 180 degrees to this or 165. Like, man, that starts to really split hairs. But yeah, appraisers can absolutely adjust if sort of there's support in the market for that. So if we start lining up properties, and this one with the beneficial view of the golf course, whatever. I mean, if sometimes there's a huge difference in value And so if I'm using something from across the street and it doesn't have that view, but then everything else is sort of up here that does have that view, then I might be adjusting up huge. I mean, it can be night and day. Sometimes it can be so significant where I'm just not even going to use those properties without a view because it really makes a big difference. Other times, though, it's kind of like, well, it's not that much. I mean, sometimes people buy properties from the builder with, all these premiums, but unfortunately the premiums kind of don't exist in the resale market. So it's like they paid $30,000 for a lot elevation premium, and then you go in, the appraiser goes, well, I don't see that the lot's elevated, like what is it? Or 100 grand to back to open space, and it's just like, well, the market might not pay that in the resale market. Maybe when you're buying a home directly from the builder. And so sometimes it's a little tricky for appraisers, and sometimes it's not always wonderful news, I think, for the owner. It's hard news sometimes. So not to discourage you, but that's sort of the process that appraisers take.
Right. Yeah. What I'm hearing from you, I think I've heard it before, is just like, it's what the market's willing to pay. So if in this neighborhood, if things with a pool sell for $30,000 premium, like that's what the market has said we're willing to pay for a pool in this neighborhood. And in another neighborhood, it might be like people are willing to pay for a view. Yeah. Cool. All right.
Even if it costs way more. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. You might have to pay $80,000 to install the pool right now, but you'll get 30,000 more if you sell. But which is the case with a lot of different things with homes. I know we could go down that rabbit hole. Nicole, thanks for joining. Asking about an ADU, which is a really popular thing in California. If you're not in California, you might not know all about accessory dwelling units, but in California, super popular thing where you build 300, 600, 800 square foot accessory dwelling unit in the back. Some call it a mother-in-law quarters, but people are building these to use as rental units a lot. And this question, Nicole, is a great one because recent changes to guidelines allow you to use that rental income for for qualifying purposes. So the answer to this question is yes. The answer to this question 3 months ago was no. And you can even use this if you're buying the place as a primary residence, which wasn't the case before, right? You couldn't use the income from the ADU. So if you've got specific questions, feel free to reach out to me and the team. But that's a guideline that I know I saw change, and I knew I'd got that question 1,000 times. So it's a popular thing, especially out in California. Theo B, thanks for asking it here, man. I think this was one of the questions I saw, and I tried to do my best to write them down so I wouldn't forget. But Theo wanted to ask you specifically, Ryan, about unpermitted additions and how does that affect the appraisal if he's going through a refinance.
Yeah, Theo, that is such a good question. And one of the themes that you'll pick up on tonight that might seem frustrating is that there's not a black and white answer, okay? And for a lot of things in value, because it's sort of like, well, what is a pool worth? Well, Beverly Hills, Sacramento, North Dakota, like there might not be one answer. And I think it's the same thing when it comes to a lack of permits, okay? And so first of all, it depends on what wasn't permitted. A covered patio, probably not a big deal at all in most markets. All right. 600 extra square feet. That's probably a bigger deal. And so here's the thing, when there's a lack of permits, especially if it's an addition of square footage, like you said, unpermitted addition, then, we don't know exactly how the underwriter's going to respond. We don't know how the lender's going to respond. We don't know how individual appraisers are going to respond. Now, theoretically, if what an appraiser needs to do is look at the market and go, what is the market willing to pay for this property? Okay. I have blog posts where one I wrote, there's a 1,000 square foot non-permitted addition. Okay. Just insane. Wow. It on paper, it was 1,400 square feet, but it was 2,400 square feet at the end of the day. And I think it's tough because some appraisers look at that and go, man, what a liability for me to call this a 2,400 square foot home. Okay. Think about this. The market in various price ranges sometimes reacts differently to lack of permits. Sometimes in different locations, a lack of permits is a big deal. So the city of Davis near Sacramento, it's a massive deal when you don't have permits, because they have a program where if something's not permitted, code enforcement has to come in before escrow closes, and you will either fix the issue, get it permitted, or it's going to be ripped out. And so I would say for a city like Davis, a lack of permits is a total game changer. But there's other parts of Sacramento where, I would say that there's a lot of janky stuff that goes on in the country, or, everyone and their mom has a non-permitted garage, right? But that's where an appraiser's lucky enough, like in a post-World War II neighborhood, you have, smaller homes, and there's so many non-permitted garage conversions. I can use one or two of those as comps and be like, here's what the market's willing to pay. But in truth, a lack of permits, this is the last thing I want to say, it infuses a sense of uncertainty in the transaction. Okay. I know it's really frustrating when the appraiser comes out, but respectfully, it's not the appraiser who caused a lack of certainty. It's, whoever did this addition without permits. And so I always tell buyers, when you buy a house and it doesn't have permits, it's not a black and white scenario. There's always going to be that question: what's the lender going to say? What's the underwriter going to say? What's the appraiser going to say? And what's the market going to say, right? And so, so that's kind of my non-answer with all those things. If you want, send me an email, and I can send you a specific post with maybe a little bit more information, but that's kind of it, I think, in a nutshell, where appraisers are going to be, considering all those things. But really, the question is, how much is the market willing to pay for this? Some appraisers would say if there's no permits, there's no value. Okay. I don't tend to think that way. I think my job is more like, what's the market willing to pay for this thing that's here? Okay. Now, if it's an illegal addition, or it doesn't conform to zoning, then yeah, that's huge. That's a huge liability to say that, this property has 5 units when 4 units are allowed. Like, that's, I'm not going to be considering something that's illegal. And so anyway, I don't want to ramble. That's a bunch of information. I hope that was somewhat helpful, Theo. If not, feel free to follow up with anything, in the thread, and I'll get to that too.
Great stuff. I went ahead and put SacramentoAppraisalBlog.com in the comments. Ryan mentioned, a blog post he had put up. How long have you been doing that blog?
Gosh, I think it's 12 years now, or I'm almost at 12 years. I can't remember, 11 or 12. I think it's going to be about 12.
I knew it's longer than a decade. So yeah. So check that out. And then I also wrote myself a note about putting your email in the description if you're cool with it, because you told somebody
absolutely.
to reach out to you via email. So that'll be in the description as well, because I know that having somebody like you chime in and help folks out is a great resource to have. So I appreciate it. I know these folks appreciate it. Where in the heck did I go with comments? Thank you to Michelle. We got a $5 super chat. Do you know about super chat, Ryan? Your kids rock YouTube as much as my kids do?
They do. They're not, putting money on there. Is that like a tip, or like a tip jar?
Yeah, basically, I think you must have knocked it out of the park with a question you answered. So I got a $4.99 super chat from Michelle. So thank you, Michelle. Whenever I get together again with Ryan, I owe him a cup of coffee, because I'm sure he earned it with answering a question that was worth a super chat. So thanks for that. All right, where did we go? We are on Theo. This one I can handle. Harminder's asking about property taxes and appraised value. When I buy a home, do the property taxes reset to the higher value of the buying price? And this is when and only time when you'll see the change in property taxes change drastically is when there's a sale, right? When you refinance, it doesn't change, but when on sale, it's gonna change based on the purchase price. And I get this question a lot, especially in the refinance season we're in. They're like, "Oh, I don't want my property taxes to change because I'm refinancing." It's not going to. It's only going to change on a sale. And then year after year, I guess this also depends on what state you're in. In California, we've got the proposition that it can only increase slightly every year. Who was I talking to? Somebody in Texas. In Texas, there's reset like every year or two, and it basically resets to like the new market value. Like they have property tax increases that are huge. So maybe I've got to step back that comment a little bit and just say, it's based on the sales price when you buy it, and then it's going to adjust differently, I guess, depending on what state you're in.
Yeah,
Anything
and
to
then
add, Ryan?
yeah, I'd say the one thing to add, at least in California, under Proposition 19 that just passed not too long ago, you can actually inherit a really low tax base from a family member. I believe it has to be parents. I'm not sure about grandparents, but if you occupy that exact property, and there's certain requirements under $1 million and such, and so there are sort of some loopholes there. But basically, a change in ownership triggers a new assessment. That's, and so I think Matt put it perfectly. A refi is not a change in ownership, but yeah, if there's a new owner on title, it's going to trigger a reassessment of the property. So that's how it goes.
Yeah, and like you said, the only way to get around that is parent to child. I think the only way you can go grandparent to child is if the parents are deceased. I think that's what I read with that Prop 19, and I know from signing 1,000 loan docs, it's a title form where you basically check a box if it's going parent to child to say, hey, I'm exempt from this change in value assessment for tax purposes because it's coming from moms to me. So that's a cool way to pass on some low property taxes. I'm always jealous when I see somebody's old tax bill of $367 every 6 months. All right, we got an appraisal question here from Sam Gerald. Thanks for joining, Sam. How do appraisals work with new builds and comps that were released just a few weeks or months before ours that are the same builder and floor plan?
It's a good question, Sam. So I'll say it's all about how has the market changed since those properties were released or since they got into contract. And so a new home might have taken, say, 6 months to build, probably longer today. And so it closes yesterday, but I'm asking, when did this one get into contract? Because it might reflect the market from 2 or 3 quarters ago. And so, again, it's sort of that balance between I'm considering the past, but I'm also going, where's the current market at? Let me look at the properties that are getting into contracts right now. And there might be a difference. Now, it is a little tricky with builders because they can make their numbers, like they have say whatever they want. Okay. And so it's one reason, frankly, why I don't actually like appraising for builders, because they'll say, hey, look, the base price was 570,000 then, and now the base price is 620,000. But there's ways of sort of like, say when a market slows, maybe the base price is 50,000 higher, but maybe the builder's giving a credit of 50,000 also. And so on paper, it looks like the market has increased dramatically, but appraisers have to sort of know the tricks from the builder that, how you can sort of change numbers, or you can start all of a sudden giving more upgrades. And, it makes it look like, the market has appreciated rapidly. Okay. So one of the hard things when I think a builder controls the data, I feel like sometimes I'm going to the sales office and all I know about the comps is what they give to me. So I go timeout. I don't like appraising in those situations, but really it's just all about gauging how has the market changed. There's a ton of ways to do that. I can look at, stuff in the whole city. I can look, in the county, in the zip code, in competitive neighborhoods. So there's a lot going on there. I hope that was helpful. If not, follow up and we can go for round 2.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks. All right. Joey Garessi, my man, here every Monday. Appreciate having you, brother. He's glad to have you on and wondering if there's a discernible difference between conventional and VA appraisals. I'm sure you get this question a lot, so you can enlighten us all on the difference.
So there's a couple things that are different about VA, and I don't do VA, full disclosure, but typically, so VA has to clear Section 1. Okay, correct me if I'm wrong, Matt. And so that is not necessarily the case with conventional. Okay, a VA, if it looks like the appraisal is going to be coming in lower than the contract price, they actually have a process called Tidewater, where the appraiser can invoke Tidewater and give the agent a call and be like, hey, it looks like this one's coming in lower. You got any more stats or comps that you want me to take a look at? Appraisers aren't allowed to do that for conventional. So I feel like that's actually an advantage for VA. It just shows that, the VA wants these deals to get done. Okay, whether that's good or bad, that's definitely what they want. But I mean, there's not any huge glaring differences, but I would say that VA is a little bit more like FHA, maybe slightly more stringent than conventional, but nothing overly glaring. But I do think sort of having to pass for Section 1, that's definitely something. It just shows that VA has to be a little bit more clean, and the seller has to entertain, do we have that situation where we can fix all these things? Yeah, but otherwise, yeah, any safety issues typically in both loans. I mean, safety stuff's going to have to be handled no matter what. So it's kind of like you can't get electrocuted, in VA, and then conventional's like, go ahead, man, you can
Oh yeah, you're
get
fine.
fried, no problem. Like not at all, not at all. I think there's some misnomers there. So.
Yeah, for sure. I think that, for whatever reason, the government loans, the FHA and the VA, might get a bad rap. But I tell people too, like if a house doesn't have, serious health and safety issues, it's going to be called out on either the conventional or the VA or the FHA. There might be a little bit of, discernment where the government stuff might be a little bit more stringent on health and safety, but not like such a glaring difference that you're going to have like a staircase that's fallen apart, be fine on a conventional loan and then be called out on the others. It's going to be called out on all of them. So, yeah, there's
Absolutely.
that. All right. Miss Taylor has a great question, and it's not loan related. It's not appraiser related, but she wants to know, she's been sitting here for way too long, determining whether that is a leaf behind me or a human brain. And Miss Taylor, my lovely wife, helped decorate the office a little bit because I'm new here and I don't have much up on the wall, but it's a lovely leaf. So yeah, I've got one in the bathroom here as well. And so I sat here doing Zoom calls for the first week or so because I moved my office from Folsom to Sacramento, and just a blank white wall behind me. So then we had to pull in some fake plants and put something on the wall so it wasn't so blank behind me. So thanks for joining us, Miss Taylor. That's a leaf. Okay, Mona asking about if appraisers look at what the buyer offered for the property and take that dollar amount into account, or is it ignored? I know the answer, but I want to hear it from you, Ryan.
Okay, so first of all, sometimes people say, hey, if we want the real deal with appraisers, they shouldn't even know the contract price. But I just always remind people, look, the Fannie Mae appraisal report form asks the appraiser to analyze the contract. And so the appraisers at least should be getting a fully executed contract, all the addendums and credits, all that stuff, and the appraisers putting that in the appraisal report. And so, but there's a difference between data collection and does it actually influence the appraiser? And I would say this, I mean, theoretically, value is not found in the contract, it's found in the comps. All right. And so, a buyer might offer 1.3 million. And, if I'm looking at all the sales that are similar and they're at 900 to 950, it's like, okay, well, that doesn't mean anything that the buyer offered. Or I might buy a property from, my dad for $1, but the contract price doesn't matter. What matters is, what is out there in the marketplace. But with that said, I do ask agents, how many offers did you get on this property? I want to understand the story of this property, the marketing of it, why the seller accepted the offer, what type of feedback that, buyers gave, that agents gave. And, if there were 14 people lined up to pay $950,000 for this house, and it looks like I'm coming in at $850,000, I better have a really good reason why I'm doing that. And so, does what the buyer offered matter? Technically, no, but can it maybe sometimes help understand a little bit about the market? Maybe somewhat, but it's very secondary data. Primary data, we're looking at comps, hands down, looking at pendings, looking at listings. So that's kind of what I would say there.
Cool. Thank you for that. I like how I'm noticing when I go through these comments, it's like purposely goes appraisal one, then mortgage, then appraisal, then mortgage. Like, very planned out by people watching tonight. You guys are above average audience with a great knack for staggering the questions, going appraisal one and letting us volley back and forth. I don't know if it was necessarily planned, but this next one's a mortgage one. And Mariah, thanks for joining. If you're pre-approved and a previously taken out loan or collection shows up on your credit report right before closing, should you pay it off immediately? Does this forfeit your entire mortgage approval? A really great question, because in general, when you're in contract to buy a house, the last thing you want is for anything on your credit profile to change. Does it mean you immediately forfeit your entire approval if something changes? No, but in regards to your question, a previously taken out loan shows up. In that case, it's going to require the underwriters to say, oh, well, this didn't show up on your credit report and we underwrote the file and the debt to income ratio was 38%. We need to look at that now. And what will happen, because this happens, a lot of things happen in the mortgage process, is, oh, we didn't know about that latest car loan. We need the note, we need the terms, we need the monthly, like, we're going to ask for information. It's going to be added to the file. And then the underwriter is going to reevaluate if after we add that debt, all of a sudden it becomes an ineligible loan because the debt to income's too high or whatnot, then essentially, yes, you'd forfeit that mortgage pre-approval. What's going to happen in the real world is your loan officer, the processor, anybody on the lending side is going to say, what can we do here? Maybe it is, like you said, you pay off the whole thing immediately, you fix the problem. Maybe it's you take some other debts and you pay those off. It will take a little bit of massaging once that comes up. That's why we want to avoid having anything change at all. If a collection shows up, more often than not, a collection is not really going to affect mortgage qualifying, depending on what type of collection it is. But in the last year or two, we've basically, as lending has kind of written off medical collections because half of them are inaccurate anyway. If it shows up and it's, a collection for a government loan and you're trying to get a government loan, that might be an issue. But without getting too long-winded, work with a mortgage loan advisor. If this happens to you, try to disclose it to your loan officer as soon as possible. The worst thing you can do is know that you have a car loan that's not being calculated in your debt to income ratio and say surprise when it's a week before closing. So that's my story and I'm sticking to it. Jason Hibbert, thank you so much, my man. Appreciate it. $10 super sticker. See how cool I am with the kids, Ryan. I get to go home and tell my boys that I've got super stickers and super chats.
Yeah, man, you're gonna owe them some Slurpees, big time.
Yeah.
So.
I'm pretty much Mr. Beast in my household. Mr. Beast.
Yeah. I do. I'm cool enough or cringy enough to know who Mr. Beast is.
Oh yeah, I'm so
he's amazing, actually.
Yeah, great guy that does a bunch of great stuff. I'm so cool. Have you ever ordered Mr. Beast burgers?
No, see, I'm not that cool.
Yeah, you got to get to that level, and I think you got teenagers. My 12 and 8-year-old, like, that was super cool when we were around their friends and we ordered Beast burgers. So different demographic maybe than this one we've got on tonight, but nonetheless, cool stuff. Mr. Beast is doing good stuff. All right, let me see where we left off. I'm good to hear from you, Alex, that you're not going to commit loan fraud. You were just asking, and I appreciate you asking, because once you find that American River Canyon house, if it's 6 months, 8 months, 10 months from now, you're likely going to be fine. You're just going to have to provide an explanation on why you did a refinance, middle of 2021 and then early 2022 moved. It could be schools, it could be work, it could be stuff like that. So just know you're going to have to explain it. All right, Jeanette's got an appraisal question. If I remodel my master bath and remove the tub, make a large walk-in shower, will this lower my home value? Removing the tub.
That's good. that's a good question, and it's hard to answer with without knowing your situation. And frankly, I think it's hard to answer anyway because there's a point where the market's not that sensitive, and so it's like if I changed all the faucets in the house, am I going to get more value? Or what if I change the switch plates? Am I going to have more value? And at some point, we're like, okay, this is not going to affect things. But I get the idea with what about removing a tub? Is that a deal killer? And I think this is where we want to look to the comps and understand the market, okay? Because if we start to look to other properties and go, wow, look, in the master bathroom remodels, they're all having a walk-in shower in all the new construction. That's exactly what they're doing. And then we go, this is not a big deal. Maybe it's even an asset, because I think in a house, it's helpful if you have, at least one tub where possible. But I think a lot of buyers are going to walk in and go, this is great. Not everyone uses the tub. This isn't 1825, right? I think a lot of people will be totally comfortable with a walk-in situation, especially, you have dual heads and it's like a party in there, right? So I wouldn't overly, think about that too much. I would maybe just in your local market though, ask an appraiser if you know one, or interview a few agents and be like, hey, what do you think? But scour the comps online and start to look at properties. Do they have tubs or not? And I think that's sort of what we need to look at to assess things. But otherwise, yeah, really nice, super nice bathroom remodel. If you hit the sweet spot of the market, then maybe it could be more valuable.
Famous quotes from Ryan Lundquist. It's not everyone uses the tub. This isn't 1825. I love it. I'm using that quote. I don't know why it sparked my memory. We went to that Winchester Mystery House this past weekend in Santa Clara. Super cool. Have you been there before, Ryan?
No, I've always heard about it. So I've been to some
man.
that I think look like it locally though, but yeah.
Yeah, you got to check that out. Yeah, I want you to go appraise the Winchester Mystery House in Santa Clara and tell me what the value. It might be hard to find comps, people that built for 38 straight years, 24 hours a day. But all right, Jason Hibbert, again, thanks for the super chat. We're gonna excuse you for being late. Apologize for being late. But he's asking what's the best way to prepare for an inspection. Is it best to have the place empty? And is there a difference between appraising a refi versus purchase? This is a really good question because I get this question a lot, with all the refinances going on right now.
Yeah, Jason, I don't think there's any one right answer. The appraiser's role there is to understand value, whether the property is occupied or not. And so I just say make sure the appraiser has access to each and every room. If the appraiser doesn't, then the appraiser's going to have to come back out. It's going to delay escrow. And so you just want to be sure that, I would say, where possible, make a good first impression. The appraiser is paid to look past personal property. I was in a house this morning and, the tenant there was saying, hey, I'm so sorry that it's dirty. And I'm like, man, I'm not even looking at this stuff. Anything here, I'm looking past everything, and I'm seeing the remodeled kitchen. I'm seeing, the gray tones on the wall, and the gray laminate flooring, and the remodeled bathroom. And so to me, it didn't matter. But I think there's a place where I would sort of make a good first impression. You don't need to bake cookies or get weird and try to give the appraiser money. I've had that happen before. I'm like, dude, I can't take your money. Come on. Don't try to influence me there. And so I would say if it's for a sale, I have an information sheet. Maybe we can link to that later in the video. Highly recommend that the listing agent share information about the property if it's a purchase. How many offers were there, and organizing the information on one page, and what feedback did we get, and all the questions I normally ask an agent. I'm hoping to teach agents share this type of stuff. Okay, now if this for a refi, theoretically there's not a difference between refi appraisals and purchase appraisals. Okay, I think the misconception is that refis are always more conservative, but frankly I see sometimes appraisals that are attached to listings. Maybe they shouldn't be in MLS, but they are. It was a refi and then it never sells for that amount. And so I think it busts that fallacy. Okay, but here's the thing. for a purchase, the appraiser has more information. The appraiser can look and say, I know what a group of buyers were willing to pay for this property. For a refinance, it's a theoretical value where you don't have as much information. And so maybe sometimes there can be a little bit of a difference where maybe that, pushes up the value a little bit when you go, wow, this is how the real market really responded. Because sometimes when we're looking on paper versus reality, it can be very powerful with what happens when something is actually listed. I just feel like there's more context.
Cool. I know I've seen that that sheet that you recommend folks have ready for an appraiser. Is it somewhere on your blog that I can find, or?
Yeah, am I
Yeah,
allowed
you
to
should
link
be.
to it in the chat?
Yeah, you should be able to
I don't
just
know if I
put the link
have
in the chat.
capability here. So, okay. Or maybe I can't do it here, but
Do
yeah, if
you see the
everyone,
comments?
I see the comments. I just don't see how I can actually leave one here with, StreamYard that we're using. So I just say, anyone can send me an email, maybe, or I can go back to the video later and put it, in the comments. But otherwise, if you Google something like cheat sheet for agents, Sacramento appraisal blog, cheat sheet for agents, Sacramento appraisal blog, it'll come up. And there's also one for a refinance. So if you Googled something like cheat sheet for refinance, Sacramento, it should come up. So it's there.
All right, cool. I'm gonna try to find it. Sacramento appraisal blog real quick because it's a good one. I can always put it in the description too. But cheat sheet for listing agents, and then then I'll link this page, and then on this page, basically there's a downloadable Word or PDF. All right, good stuff. I'm gonna put it in here. Bam. Think I did it right. I'm not very techy, but I try. So that should be showing up in the comments.
There we go. You got it.
Yes, sir. See, I'm learning from all these young whippersnappers. I'm learning so fast that you might have heard it here first. I'm going to be on TikTok pretty soon. I've got some people in marketing. They're all I've got to do is record shorter content stuff, and they're going to figure out how to edit it so I don't look like too big of a nerd and then put it out on TikTok. But Matt the Mortgage Guy on TikTok coming soon. All right. Arzian wants to know about some strategies for cash out refinance from your experience. I'm not sure what necessarily you're looking for. So maybe clarify for us on what exactly are you looking for strategy on a cash out refinance? Because depending on if it's your primary, depending on if it's an investment and what you're trying to do, there's going to be limitations on the lending side on how much you're able to borrow. And I can tell you stuff based on different loan to values that are going to have different pricing. But yeah, I don't know if he's looking for a special strategy where it's going to appraise for 100,000 more. Is that where the envelope is left on the counter, Ryan, with the full of cash?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah. Stuff like that happens all the time. Yeah. Don't do that to the appraiser, guys. So it does happen where it's like, hey, I need this one to appraise at this amount. The appraiser's probably going to go back to his or her office and send something to the lender to say, I'm going to withdraw from this assignment. I'm out of here.
Yeah,
So.
that's definitely not what you want to do. I mean, in a world where lenders are super busy and have all the business in the world, the last thing you want to bring to me is anything that might resemble mortgage fraud, because it's me risking my license for one deal when I'm doing 300 a year. And the same thing goes for appraisers. Like, you spend a lot of time as an appraiser going through all the steps you need to take to become an appraiser. And then you're an appraiser in a busy market like this one with orders on orders on orders and plenty of business. The last thing appraiser is going to do is risk their license and risk their livelihood for, a few $100. So don't do that. That's the moral of the story there. But if you wanted to clarify, Arslan, on what you kind of meant by strategy, I can maybe help you with the loan side of that. All right. Zeta talking about an older house built in the 50s. We put a lot of work into it over the 21 years we lived there. But the shed is shot. Does that affect the appraisal? It's a good question. I think there's a lot of shot sheds in California where people might, have a nice house and then there's a shed that's falling apart in the backyard. What's your opinion on that one?
Absolutely. So first of all, philosophically, from a value perspective, I think buyers look at the whole property. They're able to understand that there's a shot shed in the backyard. They're valuing everything else. Okay, and so fundamentally, probably not a huge deal for value, but I think where it can get interesting now is for different loan types, where FHA would say everything within the parcel lines has to meet FHA minimum property guidelines, property standards, and so because of that, if the shed's shot, then the appraiser might have to call it out and say, "Hey, there's a ton of wood decay, or there's defective paint here, or something looks unsafe." Okay, or if it's for any type of loan and there's a safety issue, someone's could get hurt, then the appraiser's probably going to mention it, and who knows what the underwriter will do. And so I think theoretically for value, it might not be any big issue at all. It might be a practical issue that the appraiser has to call out. Okay, at least appraisers are asked to photograph everything these days, and so the appraiser is going to be sharing photos of stuff, and and if it's in the purchase contract, that sort of thing. I mean, people are going to see it, and so there's ways of, I think, hiding stuff, but the appraiser's not there to hide anything. So I probably wouldn't overthink it, but you kind of need to be aware of what type of financing is being used, because that could be an issue. FHA, VA, or if it's really, really bad, yeah, maybe conventional, it becomes an issue. Okay, but like I said, hopefully not. Hopefully it's no big deal. Smooth sailing. Properties sell all the time with janky sheds. They really, really do.
Yeah. One thing I'll add is like you said, certain loan types, FHA might be called out. I can think back, last year where we had one where it was a humongous, 2-acre parcel with a house and a shed. And the shed was far enough where it wasn't bothering anybody, but FHA called it out. And basically we had to have it removed. We had to have somebody come out and tear it down and drag it off the property. And that was, because it was a hazard and it was a health and safety issue. Appraiser called it out, and basically the lender said, based on the findings of the appraiser and what they're saying, we're going to order that it be removed and a reinspection be done to show that it's been removed. And so held up our transaction, but that's what was required for that specific type of financing. Another good question here about appraisals, another one that comes up quite a bit, is, roof with signs that it's very end of its useful life. Flashlights, curious on whether this would be called out on a conventional or stop the mortgage, or does it need to have like leaks, or does it need more problems like a leak fix, an end of life roof?
Yeah, flash of light. First of all, I hope that's your real name, because you sound like a superhero, super cool. Okay. But so there's not sort of a leak rule where, there's 3 spots in the ceiling, and so we're going to call it out. Or let me measure. Okay, they have to be 4 inches across, or 4 to 13. There's nothing like that. And so this is where the appraiser has to use good professional judgment. And if I was at a property and then I noticed that, wow, this roof is not looking its best ever, then I'm going to simply say that, first I'm going to email the lender, and I would say that, it looks like this roof, it's near the end of its economic life. And I would condition for a 2-year roof certification. And so there's going to have to be a roofer that comes out and says, yes, this roof will pass. If not, then, it's going to have to be handled somehow. Okay, the seller, if they're going to obtain financing or have a financed offer, they're going to have to deal with this issue, and hopefully it doesn't, kill the deal and such. But again, that's sort of one of those, health and safety things, economic longevity. For any type of loan, conventional, I would absolutely call it out. I will say I appraised a property years ago, And this roof looked so bad. Okay. And I could see it from the street that all the shingles are curling. And I just thought, this thing is gnarly. Or I'm upstairs in, the bedrooms. I'm taking photos of the roof, from 4 feet away. And I mean, this looks really, really bad. And guess what? Conventional loan appraiser didn't say a thing. Okay. In my mind, I think the appraiser didn't do the job that he or she was supposed to do in that instance. But if I was the appraiser for the loan, I guess the buyer was maybe happy that I wasn't. I was there for a different reason at first. I absolutely would have called it out and said, hey, this needs to be investigated further. My job's not to brush stuff under the rug, but just to highlight what's there. And if they want to do the deal, great. But yeah, that 2-year roof cert, can it pass? That's the issue. And so the 2-year roof cert comes back and, great. That's exactly what was asked for. And maybe the lender would say, we want the appraiser to upload that at the end of the appraisal report. Okay. And then, the appraiser can do that if the appraiser wants, right?
Good stuff. Good stuff. You triggered a memory for me when you said brushed under the rug, because I agree with you. It's the appraiser's job to go out there and really, in some circumstances, protect the buyer. As a buyer, you shouldn't hope for things to get missed so that you can close on a transaction. You should hope that the appraiser, gives you a fair estimate of value and points out stuff where it's like, you might want to further inspect the roof. You might want to further inspect, the heating and air conditioning system because it appears to be old, whatever the case may be. That's part of the reason why you pay for an appraisal. It's part of the reason why you pay for a home inspection, is to get these things found out. And what you triggered my memory on is when you said brushed under the rug. Earlier this year, I had somebody trying to buy an investment property, and we get back the appraisal, and my production manager says, "Hey Matt, look at this appraisal. Look at this." They had in the garage put those big Persian rugs down and then put duct taping the rugs to the ground. And for whatever reason, when the appraisal was done, like something didn't feel right, they pulled up the rugs, humongous foundation cracks, like a serious issue. And they thought like, oh, if we put a rug over it and just tape it, like that'll fix it, right? And so I remember the transaction well, because everybody was a little bit upset about it. And I thought to myself, like, why are you upset? Like, because I'm happy that my buyer found out they might not be walking into $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 worth of foundation problems. Like, this is a great thing that they didn't purchase a house that might, bankrupt them later if it turns out to be a $50,000 foundation issue. So anyhow, yeah, don't sweep things under the rug is a good moral of the story there. And literally in a case that I saw like not too long ago, they were trying to put things underneath the rug. Oh, this is a question I'm sure you've never seen before, Ryan, but are Zillow estimates close to accurate?
Harminder, that's a great question, and I would say it's hit and miss. I mean, it's all over the place. Sometimes Zillow is spot on, and other times it's off by hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so, one issue to consider with Zillow is that they have a habit; their algorithm sort of chases the list price, and so before a property is on the market, this estimate might be much different. All of a sudden, it lists at 650,000, and then magically, this estimate comes in somewhere around there. And so, so they base their accuracy rate on what the property sells for compared to the most recent estimate. And here's why that's a problem. Imagine what the property sells for compared to the original's estimate that was way down here. And so it helps their accuracy rate if it gets closer to what it sells for. So it might sound really nerdy, but this is where we got to be careful with numbers, and when we quote accuracy rates and such, it really, really matters. But yeah, it's profoundly hit and miss. But all day long, I'm asked, why is the value different than Zillow? And so I'm just used to that as an appraiser. I actually regularly check Zillow for all my lawyer clients because I know that I'm going to be asked, and I'm probably going to have to sort of defend myself, so to speak, over what Zillow says. But yeah, sometimes right on the money, other times really, really far off.
Right. Yeah. And that's the thing too, is I think with those different algorithms, whatever goes into them, it's imperfect, but sometimes it's like, yeah, if you want to get a rough estimate, that probably works in most neighborhoods. But then, yeah, it can be way off to where you don't want to rely on it. Because I've seen stuff too where, yeah, someone's doing a refinance. They're like, Zillow says this. And I'm like, I have no idea why it says 950, but literally like your neighbor's house that was bigger and better shape sold for, $150,000 less. So to think that you'll appraise at 950 might be a stretch. All right. I think we're going to take a couple more questions and I'm going to try to wrap it up at the hour and a half mark. I appreciate your sticking with me for this long. This is always fun. It's cool to have a guest on too. Let's see here. What else can we pluck out of here? I just saw one. Oh yeah. Jason was asking about, is there like a percentage or a formula that you use to determine how much comp is used in your assessment in comparison to the property itself?
I'm not totally sure what that means.
I think what he's asking is like when you're analyzing a property. Yeah, I think Jason might not be taking into consideration like, yeah, you're looking at the property and you're comparing it to other stuff. And then you're kind of adjusting up and down, nicer condition, smaller lot. And so it's not like, certain percentages based on like you just looking at the property without comparing it to anything. I think the value you're assigning is basically all comparison, right? You're looking at everything else in the market and how it compares to this one, and then making adjustments with those, and then coming up with a fair value for this one. Yeah,
no, that's accurate. And I think, and I don't really know exactly where you're going with that, Jason. But how different can a property be? And I'd just say at some point when a property is so profoundly different and we're adjusting, 70% higher than it sold, I think we just have to step back and go, man, is that even comparable? And so I think for a lot of years, lenders would say if there's a difference above 15% difference, adjusted difference, that we're going to sort of, hammer appraisers on that. But, my understanding has been done away with. But, the underwriter still might ask at some point, it's like, man, you adjusted this thing up by 43%, like, something has to give. Is this really comparable at the end of the day if we're adjusting so much? And so why not find something that doesn't require as many adjustments if that actually exists? I think that's the ideal. The best comps don't need adjustments. And I know that's like a real estate textbook answer, but I think sometimes we're so infatuated with that property next door that's completely dissimilar, and we're ignoring the stuff that is actually really, really similar, that would actually require less adjustments. Those are the ones that are real comps.
Yeah, I haven't heard that before. That makes sense, though. The best comps are, need the least amount of adjustments. That's good. See how much I learn on these lives too. I get to come in here and be a student.
Look at you, man. Look at you.
And this next question too, I'm excited to hear the answer, because it's something that I'm curious about, just because of how busy lenders have been and how busy appraisers have been. Joey wants to know, when you're doing the appraisal, how much of your time is spent at the subject property and how much of your time is spent, market research. And I think probably I'll add to this, if Joey forgot to mention it, is like writing the report, right? Because it's a little bit of due diligence. Like you said, you got to kind of research and gather information. And then you also have to put it down on paper on the report. But what would you say the average appraisal, time in property and then time outside of property, both research and writing?
Sure. So there's no one answer. I will give you something, but think about the inspection like the tip of the iceberg, though. The appraiser's going there to make observations, and realistically, I mean, the appraiser has inspected thousands and thousands of homes. We know what to look for. We don't need to spend 2 hours there. Now, if it's a multi-million-dollar house, a really funky shape, I mean, there are just so many things to think about. One of the reasons why I might charge more for something like that, because I know I'm going to be at that house for 3 or more hours, like crunching details, having conversations, and measuring the freaking beast. Okay. But, typically it's like 30 minutes or maybe even less at some point. Okay. Sometimes when appraisers say 10 minutes, I'm like, oh man, wait, time out. That's probably a little too quick, man. Or you got to just at least stick around so the person doesn't think that you're missing stuff anyway on a practical note. But it's probably going to be quick. Most of the time I'm telling people you have a standard ranch home. It's a rectangle box. It's a piece of cake to measure. And I'm probably going to be there for 30 minutes or less, right? How long does it take to type the report and do all that stuff? I mean, it's going to vary substantially. I think a lot of appraisers would be like anywhere from 5 to 7 hours, right? I think some appraisers would be like, this is complex and it took me, 13 weeks to do. And I get that. I get that. That's probably not going to be the bulk of appraisal assignments for a mortgage finance transaction. Now, honestly, sometimes they can be really, really complicated. It's like a dartboard, right? Like, where is value and how can I support that? And that's a beast of evaluation. Very, very tricky to figure out what a trapezoid's worth in a market of squares, right? Or circles, whatever shapes we want to use. But that's kind of it in a nutshell. And I know we have let's roll with these questions, Matt. So
Yeah,
I know we got some more here, and let's get as many as we can.
All right. This is a good one in a market where a bunch of people are refinancing. Do you recommend to wait for pending high sales to close, escrow before you refinance? My advice would be, it's a little bit scary, right? Because it's the same thing with people that are like, should I wait for my credit to improve before I refinance? If you wait for the market, and even if it's 2 or 3 weeks, we've seen mortgage rates be super volatile this year, where if you wait for a pending sale to close so that your house appraises for an extra 25,000, but rates move an eighth or a quarter in the meantime, you might be worse off. It's going to be really scenario specific, because if you need it to appraise for 700 because you're trying to refinance and get PMI removed and you owe 552, that's a different story. But if that extra appraised value isn't going to affect your refinance, then you don't want to wait, because waiting in the mortgage world, as a lot of people have seen this year, can be detrimental. Rates can fluctuate and go up. So my mortgage advice there is, if it makes sense, you want to proceed. Oh, look at my friend Michelle. She's local to the market. Speaking of real estate investors, how you doing, Michelle? Do you go with exact comps further out if the 1 mile radius over those comparable, but not exactly within the 1 mile?
That's a good question, Michelle. And really, there's no such thing as a 1 mile radius where an appraiser has to use that distance. Okay. I am a bigger fan of, instead of trying to go out further to find stuff, let me just go back further in time in the immediate neighborhood, understand what was here, and I can adjust these older sales up if I need to. Okay, but here's a good statement. It's not about how far an appraiser can go, it's where should an appraiser go. Okay, so maybe I can go multiple miles in a more rural market because that's what buyers are doing, or it's a geodesic dome and you need to go 10, 20 miles out. Like, I get that. It's a property on the river and I'm going to need to use, sales from a couple different counties maybe, right? Or a couple different cities. But it's not about how far can I go, where should I go? And so the issue is if I'm sort of going out further between 1 and 2 miles to competitive neighborhoods, that's one way to do it. But I kind of want to hone in too, then just ask, when I look at older sales, do these sales, once I adjust up for the market, does it make sense here? Because sometimes we go out further and we end up cherry picking stuff that is way higher. Okay. And it's always way higher. It's hardly ever way lower. Like, that's the struggle, with the higher valuation, with the inflated valuation. And so I just think we have to be really careful about confirmation bias and, seeing what sort of we want to see rather than seeing the market, which is why I just say, make sure that we're looking at 1 to 2 years of sales in the immediate neighborhood, not just going out right away. Because sometimes I talk with agents and they say, hey, how far back can I go for comps, or I'm not seeing the market. And, I'm like, well, tell me how far you've gone. And then, it's like this focus on the past 3 to 4 months. But Okay, I don't think that's a wide enough focus. Sometimes we need to, step back a little bit. Even FHA, they have more strict parameters. They would say we want appraisers to use comps within 12 months. Like, it's okay to use older stuff as long as there's a reason to do so, as long as we're not glossing over newer, lower stuff. So I hope that makes sense.
It makes sense. What she wants you to do is use a duplex that sold at a premium, not too far away. Yeah, friend of mine. Appreciate you jumping on, Michelle. We'll see what happens. I know. Duplex she purchased has gone up quite a bit in value, and we'll see what kind of stuff pops up comp wise. That might help the
and real
appraisal.
quick, and that's the thing though, for a duplex, the market probably isn't like these two streets right here. Okay, a buyer looking for a multi-unit property, I mean, it's probably a wider area anyway, and so that's where it becomes so important for the appraiser to just be in touch with where is the market for this thing. Is it multiple miles? Is it, these sort of streets? Is it the, school district? Is it the entire zip code? Is it this really, really tight area? And the appraiser has to have real logic and real understanding with that. And I just say, where else are investors looking for duplexes and paying a similar amount? That's probably a clue, at least in my mind.
Cool. Just want to acknowledge a few thank yous. Thank you, Harminder, for the kind words. Me and Ryan are having fun. At least I am. I'll speak for him too.
I am.
And then Paloma Real Estate Solutions. Thanks for joining. This is a good question too. I'm genuinely curious about it. Are appraisers ever pressured to lower the appraisal if the value is much higher than the contract price? And I'll add on to that saying, if you go out to a place and like everything kind of points towards like this thing's worth 600, but they're in contract at 560, can that in contract, since like you said, you're looking at the residential purchase agreement, can that pull value down? I think this is kind of what that is implying.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, it comes down to the contract price isn't, sort of a nod to value in all cases. And frankly, there's been a lot of properties, I would say, thankfully not the majority, but there were some this year when the market was really aggressive where I would look and go, why in the world did they sell that low? They left money on the table. And so I think underpricing is sometimes an issue, and it's not a problem if it gets, bid up to a reasonable level where it should be. But I think sometimes, on the lender side, appraisers can be scrutinized to say, why did you bring this one in at this level? And it's like, oh my word, you cannot win, right? But that's where the appraiser needs to give commentary and say, and if that was me in a situation like that, I would say that I would probably just put that, there were 7 offers on the property or whatever the situation was. It's a private sale and it looks like the contract price is lower than a reasonable value because I'm giving the most weight to comps 1, 2, and 3. And these bad boys sold between 590 and 610. I'm calling value at 600. There's literally nothing at 560. Look at my trend graphs in the report. And so, appraisers don't always have to sort of meet the contract price there. Now, I think sometimes the temptation is like, I don't want further scrutiny and I'm going to bring it in at 560. But I just say, that's not the role of the appraiser. The appraiser, if value's there at 600, the appraiser should be bringing it in where it's at. But yeah, sometimes it's ridiculous with lenders and appraisal management companies, the type of, silly stuff that appraisers, get asked to explain. It's like, why is it in contract, or why is the value higher than the contract price? And it's like, say what? I mean, because it is, And so I just really, really silly.
Right. Yeah. Like you said, you can't win. It's kind of like being a lender. No matter what you do, you can't win. It's your fault. Know thyself first. This is a good question, and probably, in response to like you talking about, you might need to use stuff, 9 months out or 10 months out. How do you scale up the older comps when you're looking back more than 6 months?
No, that's a great question. And I would do 2 things. Number one, the simple thing, I'm looking at pendings and listings right now. Okay. How do they compare to the sales in the past? That helps give me a gauge. And, I'm talking to agents too, like, hey, what are you in contract for? If you can let me know, I need to know the terms of these properties. Okay, so that helps. But what really helps me is making trend graphs, and I'm not I mean, I would say I'm not. I kind of am a numbers nerd, and using Excel. I have a ton of tutorials. If anyone ever wants to learn how do you make graphs with real estate data, one of the ways that I show what the market's doing and I support my adjustments for the market has gone up is I'm making graphs, and I'm going, from 1 year ago in many neighborhoods around when the pandemic happened versus now. I mean, it's pretty easily six figures or so in a lot of places in Sacramento. But I'm not just making that up. I'm looking at my graphs and how has my trend line changed over time, or I'm looking at the past 6 months versus now. And so that's one of the ways I would do that. But also just sales versus pendings and listings. But there's a lot of things that people can do. So, but that's kind of sort of maybe my two pet ways that I would do it.
Cool beans. All right, I'm gonna get to a couple last questions. Johnny, I appreciate you. He says hit the like, y'all. So if you haven't hit the like button, and you appreciate Ryan spending an hour and a half tonight answering all these appraisal questions and giving us the skinny from a master appraisal, master appraiser, smash the like button. What do the kids say? Smash the like button for the YouTube algorithm. I think that's it. Know thyself first is planning on renovating an older property. Wondering if it's better to spend money on cosmetics like kitchen and bathrooms or something major like the roof or HVAC. So that's a good question. What would you say as an appraiser? Direct impact on value, I think, is probably what people are looking at here.
Oh gosh, it's so tough because they definitely need to work. So I'm liking that it's old, but it still needs to work, because my sense is that sellers will often say, I spent $25,000 on the roof and this HVAC costs $15,000. And so they expect for buyers to pay that. But I always turn the table on a seller. If I'm able to have this conversation, I just go, okay, let me ask you honestly, would you pay $35,000 more for this house if it had a brand new roof and brand new HVAC? The answer is probably no. So I think that buyers tend to pay more for bling in a house, generally speaking, very, very general, rather than for the stuff that they expect to be there and working. Like I had a sewer line that we replaced 1 year ago, December 2020. We were lucky enough to have to spend $14,000 to replace a freaking sewer line. And so I wrote a blog post about it and said, is my house worth $14,000 more now? And I already knew the answer. Absolutely not. Okay. It probably really didn't increase value at all, because every buyer out there is not even thinking about that. They expect for it to be working. You expect for the roof to do its job. You expect for the HVAC and the AC to do what they need to do. That doesn't mean that they're not valuable. It just means when a buyer walks into a place and goes, whoa, look at those shaker cabinets and the, straight edge, quartz counters and, the luxury vinyl planks, and that's the bling that distracts buyers in many cases, where they're going, I'm going to pay more. I get excited about that rather than that really super hot, sexy roof. Like one,
Yeah,
like
or that
you
really
see how they
fancy
just
sewer line.
yeah, that super, super fancy sewer line. And so I think, if you're going to flip a property, you have to have your basics there, hands down. But, if something's not working, you're going to have to eat that cost. But if you're preparing for resale and the stuff is working, again, look to your comps. What are people paying for in the market? Let's look, do they have new stuff? Like if this property was sort of totally remodeled on the inside, but sold with a mediocre roof and mediocre HVAC and AC, then there's your answer, right? Let's just try to even look at the photos. What was new, because I find in a lot of cases buyers are not going to pay dollar for dollar for the stuff that should be working. Just my experience, but I think that's generally how the market works.
Right. This one kind of goes with what you were saying too. Jason's asking about what are some common issues that negatively affect appraisal that you might see. He says specifically flippers who forget to address the ...
flippers who forget to address I would just say maybe being out of touch with, loans. If FHA was dominant in the neighborhood, then there's all these safety issues, flippers who are sort of out of touch with, loan requirements. But I don't know, there's not one thing that's really, striking me. I just think that appraisers do recognize quality work though, and we can sniff out sort of lipstick on a pig. There are some technology companies who are buying properties in the market who do a pretty poor job upgrading them with the most bare bone updates possible. And I think of a flipper in my market who consistently was selling below everyone. And I don't think it was just a marketing strategy, but it was every time I appraised one of the properties, I just knew that, man, that it just, the baseboards don't look right when they're installed. And it just looks like corners were cut all over the place. So it's just not going to be able to compete at the top of the market. And so I think that, corner cutting is very apparent. Not always easy to gauge quality, but I think sometimes we get a sense and go, man, it doesn't feel tight. It doesn't feel right here. And, when something doesn't look right, then I'm starting to ask questions about other stuff. It's like, man, if someone didn't care to install the baseboards correctly, or, to put on the toilet correctly, like what other corners did they cut? And I'm going to scrutinize that. It's time to get out the microscope for everything else. And so, and if there's not, permits, where I'm looking going like, man, there is no way that sucker was permitted. I mean, it just opens up a whole can of worms when there's a lack of quality. So that's kind of what I can think of for now, for your question.
Yeah, that's good. All right. This is a funny one. Do listing agents ever hound you before a tricky appraisal?
It depends on what you mean by hound, but so, but I think that whenever something's tricky, it's the listing agent I think is very smart to want to have a conversation with the appraiser, use the information sheet I talked about. I mean, tell the story of the property. Okay, be hands-on, be proactive about helping the appraiser understand the feedback you got about this. Maybe how you price the property. I'm going to want to hear about that. But I just spoke in an office recently, and it was interesting because they were asking me a question like, what would an appraiser do in this situation? I was like, well, it sounds like there aren't any comps to support the contract price that high, right? And so at some point, appraisers aren't magicians, as much as people would like us to be. I can't invent value. I can't create it. I'm not, God. I don't have that sort of power in the market. And if I could say real quick, sometimes in agent forums, appraisers are sort of labeled as having a God complex, and I totally reject that. I have not met an appraiser who acts like that. I know that there are some bad apples out there. There's bad apples in any profession, but that does not typify, the vast bulk of appraisers in this space who are just trying to do a good job and who sometimes come across properties and go, who was smoking crack to price it this high? Like, there's no support for that. And the appraiser's going to get reamed, but it's like, man, there's nothing there, right? And so, yeah, appraisers and agents can, I think, butt heads over times, but rather than hounding, I'm just like, talk about the right stuff that really matters for value, which is what I mentioned on the information sheet. That's the stuff I want to know about, okay? Because it helps me do my job. It helps me understand how did the market really, really respond to this property. That's exactly what I want to know.
Cool. That's good stuff, man. Well, I'm going to cut it off here. I appreciate the heck out of you. I want to respect your time. We're going on an hour 45. I know I haven't eaten dinner yet, so I need to get home probably cold on the counter by now, but I'll hit it in the microwave. I appreciate everyone that joined, especially you, Ryan. Thanks for agreeing to come on. Always great to chat with you. Market insight, not just from the appraisal side, but also all the real estate stats that you have. So if anybody wants more of that good stuff, as far as like the graphs and real estate market data and whatnot. You can find blogs that go back 12 years, sacramentoappraisalblog.com. Check that out. Do you have anything else that you want to share, or any last, parting words of wisdom, Ryan?
No, I'll just say that if you guys have questions, feel free to reach out, no problem. But just realize that the market is always moving. And for me, that's the most fascinating thing there is about real estate. It doesn't stay the same. So there's always something new to understand, whether it's new laws that change zoning, or iBuyers, or the way that we purchase and sell real estate. I mean, it's dynamic, and so let's stay on top of the trends and understand sort of how the market's moving, because that's what it's all about.
Cool. Thank you so much, man. It's good talking to you. I'm sure we'll chat soon.
Right on, Matt. Hey, thanks, and thanks everyone.